Now it's time for a look at the stories that are making the headlines in media across the world. We begin with Bloomberg. It reports the US First Lady Melania Trump visited children displaced by the country's immigration crisis in Texas a day after her husband reversed course and ordered families to be kept intact. But the jacket she wore for the trip conveyed a very different message. The Financial Times reveals that the boss of US microchip giant Intel has resigned because of a past consensual relationship with an employee that violated the company's non-fraternization policy. The Daily Telegraph has a story about the US ambassador to Britain, who has reportedly said that Britain needs to shed its defeatist attitude towards Brexit and take inspiration from Donald Trump. Woody Johnson also said he did not think Brexit would present a major challenge and questioned why the UK was so nervous about the prospect of leaving the EU. The Times says aircraft manufacturer Airbus is reconsidering its operations in Britain amid the uncertainty over future relations with the European Union. Airbus said it was concerned by the lack of progress in Brexit negotiations. The firm employs 14,000 people at 25 sites across the UK. The Straits Times reports that a local startup in Singapore is looking into better insurance policies for freelance workers. The group says more than 22,000 Singaporeans are self-employed and there is a need for better income protection schemes. The Guardian has some sad news today. Coco the gorilla, who learned sign language and formed several celebrity friendships while in captivity in the US, has died at the age of 46. So let's begin. With me is Oliver Cornock, Editor-in-Chief at the Oxford Business Group. Oliver, welcome back. So let's start with Bloomberg's coverage of this visit by Melania Trump, which she did want to be a sort of humanitarian visit, the positive side of the administration showing that they can do the right thing, perhaps. But it's the jacket that's caused a lot of controversy, and specifically what it said on the back of it. Well, on one level, she's trying to do some humanitarian work here. Perhaps she's also trying to support her husband, who's made a rare policy reversal. And the policy itself is sending mixed messages, but my goodness, this coat is as well. She's somebody also normally chucks a coat over her shoulders, so she's wearing this coat as well, which seems strangely poignant. I think more broadly, there's a huge amount of confusion here. There's a huge amount of international opprobrium against this policy of splitting children from their families. And, you know, frankly, if she's trying to help, it's not much help at all. I suppose the only person this has probably helped is the brand that made the jacket, although you wonder whether this is a toxic. Well, so the words are, I really don't care, do you? Which actually belies what she has been doing, because she was the first to speak out against this, and she's obviously gone, and apparently this visit was her trip. And her people have basically said, it's all a fuss about nothing. There was no hidden message here or very explicit message. Donald Trump, however, has said something different about it, hasn't he? Well, he's jumped straight on saying it's a message to the fake news media. You know, I just struggle with this. I can't think that something like this wasn't choreographed with an inch of its life. And the fact that she's put a coat on with a slogan on, to me, smacks of either sheer incompetence or a rather unpleasant message. What about the children here? Because it is a mess. They're not sure how they're going to... Yeah, of course it is. It's not clear how they're going to be reunited, and if they can even be reunited with their parents, because they're undocumented. Nobody knows exactly who they are and who they belong to, and their parents are locked up. And US law also, to add further complication, has different time periods for detention of children and adults. So the whole thing is a complete mess. Step back from this, though, and we've had other stories about migration and refugees in Europe. This, I've said it before, I think we need globally a much greater debate about refugees. There is an inexorable drift of people to developed countries that is unsustainable. We need a proper debate about it, and whether it be in Brexit, whether it be in Europe, or whether it be in the United States, we are not having that debate, and this will continue. OK, Oliver, let's turn to the Financial Times. And this is a story about the boss of Intel who's been forced to step down for non-disclosure of an employee affair. This is several years ago. It's not current, but it breached the company's code of conduct, didn't it? Absolutely, and it's part of a broader move. You know, we've seen an awful lot of these stories recently. You know, this isn't the first time a big company has had people resign over this. Of course, the corporate world's regulations and rules are all different. Silicon Valley has some very strict rules. In a media company such as Oxford Business Group, we probably don't have quite the same rules. And some would argue that, you know, there's a separation between work and play. All of these things. I'd argue that the chairman, the CEO, probably can't have a relationship because actually he's always going to be superior to everybody else. It seems to be there's absolutely no fraternization at Intel. It's an interesting one because, of course, Intel's only had 6 chiefs in its 50 years
of existence. This is a big internal story, but stepping back, it does say something about the way the corporate world is moving forward. We've seen an awful lot of moves in Hollywood, in other industries, as to the relationships between individuals, and this is just speaking to a different area of that, I think.
And senior executives in companies all around the world will no doubt be thinking about possible past relationships and wondering whether or not it's going to come back and bite them. We've been asking our viewers this morning whether or not they've breached a relationship code in their workplace. We've had this in from Roger, who says, "Blimey, in my office, relationships are rife all over the shop. No one says anything about it, and employees don't take notice of policies regardless of what they are." This one from Rogue Actuary says, "In the workplace, the pretense of fairness seems hard enough to maintain. The worst scenarios are when the no relationship rule is dropped within an organisation, and then when someone senior seems to take advantage of it." So some kind of mixed views coming in, and also whether or not people know what their employee demands of them. I'm not sure what the BBC's policies are with regards to relationships.
I think the point of the tweet made there, take advantage, of course, is the essence here. These rules are there to prevent people taking advantage and the obvious bullying that could result in that.
Let's take a look at the Daily Telegraph now. And this is comments from the US ambassador to the UK, basically telling us all over here to buck up and stop being so defeatist about Brexit.
And I was speaking to investors yesterday at an event here in London from overseas, from Asia. And whilst a lot of people, it has to be said, I speak to around the world, cannot understand the Brexit decision that was made, they also can't understand why Britain isn't being more confident in its negotiation. And I think, well, the story we were talking about, investors needing confidence, actually uncertainty is the devil of investment, and we really do need that. So this speaks to something that I think is really important. A bit more confidence is what Boris Johnson has said as well. He was filmed or recorded saying that perhaps if Donald Trump was negotiating, we would be in a different position. And I think that sort of is quite a welcome message, actually.
That's what the ambassador's saying. Take inspiration from Donald Trump. But let's turn to the Times, because this is one company that is being pessimistic. It has to say Airbus, which is a very European company. France has, I think, a 10% share in the company. Germany has a big share as well, as does Spain. Big job numbers over here in terms of potential losses if it does go. 14,000 people directly employed, another 110,000 in subsidiary supply chain jobs as well. But they're being quite negative, aren't they? They
are. I think also when you scratch the surface here, and you made a very good point that Airbus is fundamentally an inherently European part of the project. I mean, it is part of the EU. And I think, Airbus advised its UK employees to vote against Brexit, remember, controversially. So I think there's a little bit more to this story. It's saying the transition period that's being debated is too short. I just then think, well, actually, you would be rehoming some of those supply chain issues to Europe. They're talking about China. To me, that's a very complicated thing. But we've talked a lot about doing business in China and how difficult that is. So to me, this is a slightly mixed message, and I don't think it's all that it seems. And just remember, it is a warning at the moment as well.
OK, let's turn to the Straits Times. And this is very much about the gig economy, isn't it? And insurance there for companies going to offer insurance for freelancers to guard against income loss.
I think this is really interesting. It's the gig economy has become a much greater part of every GDP stat we read. It's growing. It's something that's hit the headlines in the UK recently, precisely because of this, because people who are self-employed were claiming rights. And there was a legal case last week, I think, with Pimlico Plumbers here in the UK. This is really interesting. This is an insurance company, in itself a startup, I love that, that is coming up with a product that people who are self-employed can pay into to cover them when they're sick and ill. That has to be good news. This probably, to me, is just the start of a much bigger new industry. A lot of people now, of course, are not just doing one job. They might be driving, they might be super PAing, they might have a portfolio of jobs. And this is therefore very welcome news.
This surprised me, actually, by the fact that it doesn't exist already. Do you think it exists elsewhere? And as you say, if not, I guess it will start to.
Absolutely. It's not something I've come across, but I'm not a specialist in this area. But all I do know is that every country I go to, the gig economy is growing. Disruption in a different way.
Absolutely. OK, and a bit of a sad story to end on here in The Guardian. Coco the gorilla has died at the age of 46. And what I found interesting about this is some of the things that Coco learnt to do, which I didn't know about.
Absolutely. It's a rather touching story. I have to, hands up, I'm not a great fan of animals in captivity, but this has taught us, it taught an awful lot of people about gorillas, who are, of course, persecuted and suffering by globalization and industry and pollution and all sorts of things. Yeah, Robbie Williams was friends with this, the late Robbie Williams. Robin Williams, yeah. Sorry, not the musician.
Robin Williams.
Somebody from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. All of these people endorsing this and showing that actually these gorillas have huge intelligence as well. Could recognise words, something like 2,000 words, sign language. Yes, there's a part of me that's a bit torn on this because I don't like the sort of trivialisation of animals that should, to me, be in the jungle. Apparently,
Coco learnt to play the recorder, and when told that his cat friend of his had died, actually communicated a response in sign language. This is amazing to me, saying cat, cry, have sorry, Coco love. I mean, the extent of the communication from a gorilla apparently has really moved on the ability of scientists, to learn more about the cognitive abilities and emotional capacity.
Absolutely, and reflects also our own emotions, which is part of it.
Absolutely. Oliver, really good to see you this morning. Thank you very much for taking us through the news briefing. And thank you